Picture this. It is
I
3 in the
love you,
morning,
Julian.
and a woman, 8 months
So
pregnant,
much.
is on her knees on the frigid hardwood floor of her Boston apartment. Water is seeping from a burst pipe under the sink. Her husband, a dedicated biochemist at a small research lab, is supposedly at a symposium in Geneva, presenting vital findings. He is not picking up his calls. She goes to his old bookshelf to find the building superintendent's contact info, and in that instant, her entire reality shatters.
We move
She
now.
finds a hidden
Deploy the
compartment
assets
behind
and
a
freeze
row
their
of
accounts.
textbooks,
This ends
but it does
today.
not hold old university notes. It holds the keys to a waterfront estate in Nantucket and a luxury flat in Knightsbridge, London. It holds financial statements for a private trust fund valued at over $90 million. And then the final blow, a second secret phone. It is filled with photos. Her husband with another woman on a ski lift in the Alps in Paris, gifting her a vintage watch he swore they could never dream of affording. He was not a struggling scientist. He was a pharmaceutical heir, and their entire marriage was an elaborate deception. The retribution she plans in the aftermath is so calculated, so brilliantly executed, and so deeply satisfying that you will find yourself cheering for her. If you have ever been lied to, underestimated, or made to feel small by the one person who was supposed to protect you, then you need to see this through to the end, because the way this woman made him regret it is unforgettable. If you believe in getting even, smash that like button, tell me your revenge fantasies in the comments, and subscribe so you do not miss the fallout, because the next part is an absolute bombshell. Let me show you how the lie was born. The emergency plumber felt a world away. I was kneeling on the floor of our apartment at 3 a.m. on February 4th, 2025, with our daughter kicking relentlessly inside me. The water damage was spreading. My husband, Leo, the man who carefully tracked our spending and celebrated getting a small research grant, was not staying at a modest conference hotel. The location data from his secret phone proved he was at a 5-star lodge in Verbier with a woman named Sophia, and the other documents in that hidden safe proved he was the sole heir to Sterling Pharma, one of the largest pharmaceutical empires in the country. My name is Alara Vance. I am a 34-year-old architectural historian, and for 5 years, I was convinced I was married to a man building a noble career from the ground up. This is the story of the deepest betrayal imaginable, and how I orchestrated a reckoning so complete it would dismantle his entire world. Let me rewind to the very beginning of the fraud. 5 years ago, I was Alara Vance, a contract historian for the city of Boston, passionate about preserving its heritage. Leo Sterling was a brilliant biochemist, new to town. The tale he spun was that he was from a powerful family in New York, but he had renounced them. He described his father as a cold-hearted CEO who viewed medicine as a commodity, not a calling. So, Leo chose his passion, walking away with nothing but his intellect to create something that would genuinely help people. He worked day and night from the makeshift lab in our spare bedroom on what he called a new class of antivirals. I would hear the strain in his voice on calls with supposed university funders. I edited his grant proposals for him. I was the one who brewed his coffee at 2 a.m. and made sure he remembered to eat. I fell for the selfless scientist, the man who picked morality over a massive inheritance. I was certain we were on the cusp of a breakthrough together. About a year into our relationship, he spun a tale about a former colleague from his doctoral program. He claimed she only became interested in his work after a rumor spread about his family's fortune. She suddenly saw my research as a stock portfolio, he told me, his expression a perfect mask of disillusionment. I just want someone to value my mind, Alara. not a net worth I left behind. His acting was impeccable. It was the ultimate excuse for living a simple life. So, I cherished our modest lifestyle. We lived in a charming but drafty brownstone apartment and drove a 10-year-old Subaru. We marked anniversaries with takeout from our favorite Thai place because fancy restaurants were an extravagance we had to save for. I felt an immense sense of pride in our partnership, believing our bond was unbreakable because it was forged in shared dreams, not dollars. I saw myself as the anchor for a genius on the verge of changing the world. I would boast to my friends that Leo Sterling was a visionary. He was a man of immense integrity who had rejected a fortune to pursue a higher calling. That was the myth he created, and I was his most fervent believer. My lawyer, Marcus, and my sister Chloe were the only two who ever raised an eyebrow. They noticed the small inconsistencies, but I was too blinded by love to see them. I was meticulously managing our savings account while he was secretly managing a corporate dynasty. I just wanted a partner who appreciated history and substance over status. In October of 2020, I met Leo Sterling at a historical society lecture where I was speaking. I was presenting my research on Boston's forgotten architecture. He was in the audience, he said later, because he believed understanding the past was key to building a better future. He looked unassuming in a simple sweater, his focus entirely on my presentation. He seemed thoughtful and sincere. When he approached me afterward, he asked about my preservation efforts and my theories. I told him I was a historian, and he said, "That's incredible. I'm just a scientist in a lab trying to piece together a puzzle." He never bragged or tried to impress me with anything but his curiosity. We had coffee that afternoon, then dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant the following week. Deliberately and with great care, I let myself fall for the man I was sure he was. Of course, I am not completely naive, Chloe insisted, so we hired a private investigator for a basic background check. The report came back squeaky clean. Leo Sterling had a flawless credit history, zero debt, and was employed by a small, independent lab called Helix Bioresearch. Everything appeared perfectly normal, almost boringly so. What I could not have known was that Helix Bioresearch was a boutique subsidiary of his family's global empire, Sterling Pharma. It was his personal, multi-million-dollar sandbox, designed to look and feel like a struggling startup. Every time a tiny seed of doubt tried to sprout, I would recall his story about the opportunistic colleague, and I would stomp it out. So I invested my faith in him, and we built what I believed was an authentic life. For our first anniversary, he took me to a rustic cabin in the Berkshires. He claimed it was the best he could manage. He made a show of struggling to light the wood-burning stove. We ate chili from a can, and he gave me a framed copy of a scientific journal where he was mentioned in a footnote. He looked at me with earnest eyes and said, "This isn't much, Elara, but it's real." I believed him completely. My heart ached with love because I thought our life was the most genuine thing I had ever known. I told him, "This is more than I could ever want. This is everything." He had crafted the perfect illusion of a man with nothing to give but his heart, and I treasured him for it. I felt a deep sympathy for him and his constant, noble struggle. Now I see that weekend, for the elaborate stage play it was, a cruel performance meant to keep me content in my ignorance, while we were shivering in that rented cabin. He probably owned the entire mountain it sat on. The canned chili was an inside joke I was not privy to. His promise to change the world for me one day was the deepest betrayal, because he already had the power to do so and had decided I was not worthy of sharing it. He proposed in August of 2022 on a foggy morning in the Boston Public Garden. He said he couldn't afford a grand gesture, but he couldn't stand another day without asking. The ring was a delicate vintage piece with a small sapphire. He swore he'd found it in a dusty antique shop after saving for a year. I wept because I thought it was the most heartfelt act of love. I adored that ring, believing it was a symbol of a love that was truly priceless. The wedding was a simple affair at City Hall, followed by dinner with a few friends at our favorite neighborhood restaurant, because that was all we could supposedly afford. His mother, Diana, attended, her disapproval a chilling presence. Her toast was a masterpiece of condescension, concluding with, "Welcome to the family, Alara. I do hope you appreciate the significant sacrifices my son is making to follow his principles." That first year of our marriage was deceptively peaceful. Leo was attentive, brilliant, and driven, everything I had ever wanted. We took a road trip to Maine for our honeymoon, staying in cheap motels he found online. We were building a shared history, and for long stretches, I could almost believe that our life was as simple as it seemed. We were renting that charming brownstone, a tiny footprint in a vast city. Leo had no idea that I was not the only one being deceived. He was paying his rent to a property management firm that was just one small asset within the massive trust he was hiding from me. I had poured our entire savings into his AII startup back in 2020, believing it was our shared dream. My life felt dedicated to that cause. I'd work from our small apartment, designing logos for local bakeries, meticulously managing our budget so he could chase his vision. Marcus told me his company, Nexus AI, was constantly on the verge of collapse. In reality, he was on confidential calls with investors, closing multi-million-dollar deals. I honestly thought our partnership was built on total transparency, the supportive wife, and the brilliant, struggling founder. Then in early May of 2023, I found out I was pregnant, and the foundation of our entire life began to crack. For weeks, a deep-seated weariness had clung to me, along with a constant, rolling nausea. An at-home test confirmed my suspicion. I took 4 more, my hands shaking. Each one showed a clear, bright plus sign. I booked an appointment with my doctor, and the ultrasound knocked the air from my lungs. "Well, congratulations are in order," Dr. Miller said, her smile warm. "You're having twins." My brain simply stopped. Twins. I wasn't prepared for a single baby, let alone 2. But then I saw them on the screen. 2 flickering lights, 2 tiny racing heartbeats, and a wave of fierce, unconditional love washed away the panic. I started crying, a messy blend of elation and sheer terror. Then her expression sobered. "Now, there is something we need to watch. It's called placenta previa, which means the placenta is currently blocking the cervix. It might resolve on its own as your pregnancy progresses, but until then, I'm classifying you as high risk. I need you to avoid any and all stress. No heavy lifting, no intense work, just rest." When I shared the news with Marcus that night, he seemed overjoyed. He swept me into a hug, kissing me deeply, before gently setting me back on my feet when I mentioned the doctor's orders. "Twins," he breathed, his eyes wide with a look of awe. "We're actually having twins." But then a shadow flickered across his face. "Wait, Clara, how are we going to manage this? The cost of childcare for 2 in Boston? It's a fortune." "We'll find a way," I promised, desperately wishing I could tell him to just take some money from the business. But I believed him when he said every penny was accounted for. What if my worrying made him feel like I didn't trust him? So, as always, I kept my financial fears to myself. We told his business partner, Isabel, a week later over dinner. Marcus insisted on celebrating, taking us to a place far too expensive for our budget. We waited until the entrees arrived. "So, Isabel, Claire and I have some big news. We're going to have twins." The clinking of silverware stopped. Isabel's smile was thin, brittle. Wow, that's a complication. We're thrilled, Marcus said, his own smile looking a little strained. And how, precisely, will you afford 2 children? She asked, her voice devoid of warmth. Your personal finances are already stretched to the limit, and the company can't take on any more of your debt. Isabel, Marcus warned, I'm being pragmatic, Marcus. Daycare in this city is over $3,000 a month per child. That's before you even factor in diapers, formula, medical care. Have you thought any of this through? We will handle it, I said, my voice quiet but firm. She turned her icy gaze on me. Will you? Will your little design projects cover it? Or do you just expect Marcus to let the company we built together go under to support you and 2 babies? That isn't fair, Marcus mumbled. What isn't fair, Isabel countered, her voice dangerously low, is derailing my partner's career with a family you know he can't afford right now. I felt my face flush with heat. Excuse me? You heard me. The timing is spectacularly bad. You're not even married a year, and suddenly you're having twins. You did this on purpose. You've trapped him. Marcus stood up abruptly. Isabel, that's enough. Is it? Am I the only one willing to state the obvious? She saw a brilliant man on the cusp of greatness and decided to anchor him down for good. Shaking with anger, I stood. I need to go home. Marcus followed me out. In the cab, I cried silently while he held my hand. She didn't mean it like that, Clara. She's just under enormous pressure with the Series B funding. She'll come around. But I knew she meant every last word, and she had no intention of coming around. That was just the opening salvo. A week after that awful dinner, Isabel showed up at our apartment with 2 large suitcases. I'm moving in, she announced, breezing past me. You're high risk, Clara. You need constant support, and Marcus needs to focus on work. It's a win-win. I looked at Marcus, my eyes begging him to say no. He just wrung his hands. Isabel, we didn't discuss this. I'm your business partner, Marcus. I don't need an invitation to protect our primary asset. And with that, she claimed our tiny spare room. That was the beginning of July 2023. The following 4 months were a masterclass in emotional warfare. She never yelled, never threatened. Her strategy was far more insidious, dismantling my confidence with such cold, corporate efficiency that Marcus didn't even notice it was happening. First, she took over the apartment. This clutter is so stressful, honey. Let me help you optimize. She purged my pantry of my favorite foods, calling them inflammatory, and replaced them with expensive, tasteless health food. She began managing all the cooking. Next, she came for my work. You shouldn't be straining your eyes in your condition. She insisted on helping me manage my client communications, implying I was too fragile to handle deadlines. She started opening our mail. Just trying to organize the bills for you, she'd say cheerfully, while asking invasive questions about our lease. Why isn't Marcus's name on the rental agreement with you? He should be, for liability reasons. I explained that I'd handled it before we were married and never saw a reason to change it. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. What are you trying to hide, Clara? Nothing. I just take care of the household admin. How peculiar, she would say, just loudly enough for Marcus to hear. Most married couples are transparent about their finances. She started screening my calls. Clara is resting, she would tell my friends. My small freelance business, my one point of pride, started to dry up as clients couldn't get through to me. My independence was being systematically erased. She monitored my food intake like a hawk. That's too much sugar. You'll get gestational diabetes. A second helping? Remember, you're creating 2 lives, not consuming for 3. I was hungry constantly, but grew terrified of eating in my own kitchen. She made my changing body a subject of daily commentary. Your face is looking puffy. Be careful, Clara. The weight you gain with twins is almost impossible to get rid of. I was only 18 weeks pregnant, and she was already making me feel ashamed of the changes happening to me. But the isolation was the cruelest part. She would turn my sister away at the door. Now is not a great time. Clara needs absolute calm. When my friend Sophie tried to visit, Isabel informed her I was feeling sick and couldn't have visitors. Sophie texted me right after, "Are you okay? Your husband's business partner is acting like a warden." I typed back a lie. "I'm fine, just really tired. I'll call you tomorrow." I never did. Isabel was always right there, listening. Around the 4th month, in August, I felt Marcus slipping away. The affection in his eyes was replaced by a flicker of doubt. He stopped touching me. He started sleeping on the couch. "You need your own space to be comfortable," he'd say, but his voice was distant. I'd hear them talking late into the night, their hushed tones drifting from the kitchen. Isabel would say, "I'm just saying, Marcus, it's strange. She controls all the household finances. She's secretive about her income, and she got pregnant at the worst possible time for us. Clara's not like that, and she's so defensive about her work. Have you ever wondered if she's being completely honest with you about what she earns? She's not hiding anything from me. Then why won't she add you to the lease? What kind of wife has financial secrets from her husband?" His sister Amelia, who was normally so kind, started calling with concerns, having been fed a steady diet of Isabel's poison. "I'm just worried about you, Marcus," she'd say, parroting lines about financial stress and Clara's supposed fragility. "Clara seems to have you on a very tight leash. What if this perfect little life she's built is all just a fantasy?" I finally confronted Marcus one night. "Isabel is poisoning everyone against me. She's just worried about the company." "Worried about what? I haven't done anything wrong." "Then why are you so cagey about our expenses? Isabel is a financial wizard, and she says the way you run our household budget is inefficient. Just let her help." "Because it's my responsibility, and I'm allowed to have some privacy." "Partnerships shouldn't have secrets like this, Clara." "I'm not keeping secrets, I'm maintaining boundaries." But he didn't understand the difference. He grew more and more remote, working later, until we were just roommates sharing a high-risk pregnancy. He'd leave before I was awake and return long after I'd fallen asleep. In late September, I noticed something was off. Isabel was constantly on her phone, tapping away in a secure messaging app. She'd take hushed calls in the hallway, referring to acquisitions and portfolio diversification. I realized she wasn't just helping, she was running a parallel life right under my nose. I confronted Marcus. "What is Isabel really working on?" He wouldn't look at me. "It's just funding stuff. It's complicated." One afternoon, I was trying to order more prenatal vitamins online, and my laptop was dead. I picked up Marcus's iPad. As I opened the browser, a notification appeared at the top of the screen from an app with a sleek black logo I'd never seen before. The message read, "Axiom Private Banking. Your transfer of $500,000 to Isabel Vance has been processed." My blood ran cold. $500,000? I tapped the alert. It asked for a passcode. My fingers shaking, I typed in our anniversary. Access denied. Then, I typed in the launch date of Nexus AI. The screen unlocked, revealing a world I never knew existed. "What are you hiding, Marcus?" I went directly to him. "Your partner isn't just your partner, is she?" He looked away, cornered. "Did you give her a reason to be suspicious of me?" "I'm your wife, Marcus. I'm carrying your children. That should be the only reason you need to trust me." "Then prove it. Show me our joint savings account statements." "No. Why not?" Because the moment I did, he would know that I knew he had been lying about everything. The broke, brilliant founder I'd fallen for would evaporate, replaced by a stranger. I stayed silent, and in that silence, he saw my guilt. September 28th, 2023. I was 6 months pregnant, 24 weeks to be exact. I remember it perfectly, because it was the day the floor fell out from under me. At my appointment, Dr. Albright pointed to the ultrasound screen. Sophie, the placenta is still covering your cervix. It's called placenta previa. I'm putting you on strict modified bed rest. Any significant activity could be dangerous. My husband, Julian, however, was distracted. Bed rest? He said later, scrolling through emails on his phone. Well, you've been wanting an excuse to relax. That afternoon, the new crib arrived in a massive, heavy box. The delivery guys left it in the lobby, he said, grabbing his keys. I've got an emergency at the firm. Can you ask the doorman to bring it up? Julian, I can't. I'm not supposed to be lifting or supervising anything. Soph, for God's sake, you're pregnant, not made of glass. Don't be so dramatic. Julian was gone. His ambitious junior partner, Ava, however, was not. She showed up at our penthouse an hour later, holding a set of blueprints. She strolled past me into the living room, her eyes scanning our home with an unnerving sense of ownership. Julian said you'd be here, she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. A sharp, pulling sensation in my stomach made me catch my breath. I was standing near the top of our floating steel staircase. That's when Ava moved closer, right into my personal space. He needs these signed. You know, he talks about you. Says you've gotten so sensitive lately. She leaned in, and her shoulder deliberately knocked into mine, forcing me to stumble sideways. The world tilted. I threw my hand out, my fingers just catching the cold metal railing. For a horrifying moment, I was teetering over a 30-foot drop to the polished concrete floor below. My baby, my unborn daughter, was almost... I held onto the railing, my knuckles white. Ava stood there, a perfect mask of shock on her face. Oh my goodness, are you okay? I am so sorry. You have to be more careful, Sophie. This pregnancy has made you so clumsy. But her eyes were cold, sharp with victory. She had done it deliberately. She had tried to make me lose my balance. She was trying to hurt my child. You... The word caught in my throat. What? It was a total accident. Honestly, Sophie, maybe you shouldn't be standing so close to the stairs in your condition. That evening, the cramps started, tight and terrifying. Julian rushed me to Northwestern Memorial. I was terrified. 24 weeks. It was dangerously early. Please, not now, I whispered over and over. Dr. Albright examined me with a grim expression. Your daughter's heartbeat is steady, but you're having preterm contractions. You are at a very high risk. I am ordering strict, mandatory bed rest. No exceptions, no stress. When we returned to the apartment, I told Julian what Ava had done. She bumped into you, Sophie. It happens. No, she looked right at me. She pushed me, Julian. You're overreacting. I'm pregnant, and your colleague just tried to harm your daughter. He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Ava would never. Why are you making these insane accusations? You probably just lost your balance. You need to accept that you can't be as active as you used to be. I looked at my husband, searching his face for any sign of support, any flicker of belief. He wouldn't even meet my eyes. That night, alone in our bed, I felt a familiar cold dread creep in. Then, I stopped crying. I reached for my laptop, the one I used for my old investigative journalism work, and got to work. I need to get into the shared family account, I murmured. I need to know what's really going on. I need to see everything, I whispered to myself, and I need to find it before he knows I'm looking. The next day, Julian left for what he called an architectural conference in Milan. The moment he was gone, I started my digital dig. Using a password I knew he'd recycled from years ago, I accessed our shared cloud accounts, phone logs, and credit card statements. There were no cameras, no listening devices, just me, my laptop, and a growing certainty that my life was a lie. From that point on, every charge, every calendar entry, every deleted email was scrutinized. I was building a timeline. It was early November, the beginning of my third trimester. I was confined to our apartment, but Julian's texts were full of dismissive advice. The doctor is just being paranoid, he'd write. A little walk would be good for you. One afternoon, Julian's business partner, Marcus, stopped by to drop off some documents. He found me in the living room, crying silently from the stress and the pain in my lower back. I was 30 weeks pregnant, and I felt like a prisoner. Marcus sat down on the ottoman across from me. Sophie, what's wrong? This isn't like you. I looked at him, my face a mess of tears. Then help me. Please, tell me what's going on with Julian. I've seen it, he said, his voice low. I've seen how he is with her, with Ava. This has gone too far. A tiny, fragile spark of hope flickered inside me. Will you talk to him? Will you make him see what's happening? I will, he promised. I'm going to set this straight. I actually trusted him. For the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't completely crazy, that someone else saw the truth. The next day, Marcus met with Julian at their downtown office. I waited by my phone, my stomach in knots, praying the nightmare was about to end. That evening, Julian came home, his face dark with controlled rage. Did you really think you could turn my own partner against me? What? No, I was just... Marcus told me everything. How you've been making up stories about Ava, trying to create drama at the firm, trying to poison my most important professional relationship. My blood ran cold. That is not what I said. Marcus doesn't lie, Sophie, but you do. You've been lying and paranoid this entire time. Marcus had betrayed me. He'd gone straight to Julian and Ava, told them I was onto them, and they had twisted the story, painting me as the unstable, jealous wife. Later, I saw an email from Marcus to Julian. He refused to answer my calls. Why? I typed back. He replied minutes later. I'm sorry. Julian controls my career. Ava is a star architect. If I took your side, he'd ruin me. He swore he'd make sure I was blacklisted from every firm in Chicago. I'm sorry. He was gone, and I knew, with a terrifying clarity, that I was completely on my own. No one was going to help me. Not Julian, not his friends. If I was going to survive this and protect my baby, I would have to do it myself. My own investigation had stalled. After my conversation with Marcus, Julian had changed all his passwords. The digital trail went cold. He thought he had locked me out. He couldn't find any evidence of my digging, of course, because I had covered my tracks. I was the perfect, isolated, pregnant wife. I heard him on the phone with Ava one day, his voice low and angry, coming from the smart speaker he'd forgotten was on. She knows something. She's not saying anything, but she knows. A pause. Keep digging. She must have left some trace. No one is that good at hiding things. But I was. At least the version of me they thought they knew, Sophie, the trusting wife, was quiet and naive. In late November, at 32 weeks, I found a deleted voice memo on our shared cloud drive that made my heart stop. Julian, Ava, and Marcus were talking. Sophie's investigation found nothing, Marcus said. Maybe she really has given up. Or maybe, Ava replied, her voice like ice. She's just waiting for the right moment. But Julian needs a reason to leave her, a real one. He needs to believe she's the one who betrayed him. Ava pushed. What are you talking about? Julian asked, his voice hesitant. What if? Ava said slowly. We gave him a reason. Ava, you can't be serious, he replied, but he sounded intrigued. She cut him off. I am suggesting we protect your future, Julian, by any means necessary. I felt sick to my stomach. They were going to frame me, but I didn't know how. I should have packed a bag right then, called my sister, and disappeared. But I was 32 weeks pregnant, terrified of the stress of running, triggering labor. I was afraid of the custody battle that would come, afraid that leaving would just confirm their narrative that I was unstable. So I waited, and it was the worst mistake of my life. Ava knew a financial tech guy, a former colleague named Leo, who had a grudge against a rival firm. He was brilliant, amoral, and available for the right price. What I didn't piece together, until it was too late, was that Ava paid him $100,000 to build an impeccable fake digital trail showing that I was stealing from Julian. Leo was a ghost. He created a series of encrypted cryptocurrency wallets that appeared to be funded by my long-dormant freelance account. Using his knowledge of international banking, he funneled small, untraceable amounts from Julian's various investment portfolios into these wallets. He then created a fabricated digital paper trail showing transactions from the wallets to a competitor's holding company. They bought a burner phone and planted it in the back of my nightstand, loaded with faked texts between me and a contact at the rival business, discussing payoffs. They even opened a shell corporation in my maiden name in the Cayman Islands and deposited $50,000 into it, making it look like my first big score. It was a sophisticated, vicious, and airtight plot designed to annihilate my reputation and ensure I lost not only my marriage, but also my child. On December 18th, at 35 weeks pregnant, I was exhausted, huge, and in constant discomfort. My daughter felt like she was doing acrobatics on my bladder. I could barely make it from the bedroom to the kitchen. Julian came into the room that evening holding his tablet. His face was a mask of cold, heartbreaking disappointment. We need to talk. Now. I'm so tired, I whispered. Now, Sophie. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He sat on the edge of the bed and turned the tablet toward me, his movements slow and deliberate, as if he were handling something toxic. Julian looked at the screen. My forensic accountant sent his final report this afternoon. My pulse began to thunder in my ears. He found some things you should probably explain. He showed me the screen. It wasn't messages or pictures. It was documents. Pages of cryptocurrency transactions, offshore incorporation papers from the Cayman Islands, and server logs. It was a perfect, detailed report on financial betrayal. What is this? I breathed, my mouth completely dry. This, Genevieve declared, her voice cold as steel, is a record of your affair. You've been leaking my son's designs to his primary competitor. That's not real. It's a fabrication. I took a step toward Liam's mother, my hands trembling. We have more, Liam said, his tone devoid of emotion. He held up a tablet, displaying emails sent from a burner account. They were filled with proprietary architectural plans and invoices. I have never seen that tablet before. I don't know what that is. Our security chief tracked the account's IP address, Liam stated, his eyes fixed on the screen. It originated from this house, from your laptop, the same one you told me you were using for your online birthing classes. I was in my classes. This is all a lie. Someone set this up. A source from inside the Rossi Group confirmed it, Genevieve added, her voice a low murmur. They said an informant had been feeding them bidding information for months. The world began to spin. Every detail was meticulously planned. It was a perfect, impenetrable lie, a work of art. Liam, please, I begged, reaching for his arm. He recoiled as if burned. Don't. Just don't. They're forgeries. All of them. If you just let an expert examine them. I've examined them, he cut in, his voice hollow. I looked at everything. The encrypted messages, the offshore wire transfers, the server logs. It's undeniable, Clara. It's a setup, I screamed, my voice cracking. Your mother is framing me. She hired someone to destroy our marriage so she could get rid of me. My goodness, listen to you, Genevieve said with a sigh. You're hysterical. Absolutely paranoid. The pregnancy must be affecting your judgment. I am not paranoid. This is a conspiracy. Liam refused to meet my eyes. I'm scheduling a DNA test, he announced, his voice like chipping granite. As soon as the twins are born, until I have proof they are mine, you will stay away from me. My heart fractured into 1,000 pieces. They are your children. He finally looked at me, his gaze full of ice and doubt. Are they? A question that hung in the air like poison. In that moment, Liam, I have no idea who I am anymore. I don't know who you are. He turned and walked out of our Chicago brownstone. His mother, Genevieve, offered a thin, triumphant smile. Liam's lead designer, Richard, just stared at the marble floor, and I was left standing there, 35 weeks pregnant with his sons, branded a cheat, a corporate spy, a traitor. My innocence was impossible to prove because the evidence against me, falsified emails detailing an affair with a rival architect, was perfect. That evening, I sent a coded message to Ben, my closest friend from law school. I'm in trouble. I need a secure location, private security, and divorce papers filed by sunrise. I can have everything ready in 48 hours, he wrote back. Make it 24, I replied. I quickly packed a small duffel bag and tucked it behind a spare tire in my Land Rover. The strategy was straightforward. The next day, Liam and Genevieve were scheduled to be at the annual Architectural Guild Awards ceremony. It was the biggest event of the year. I would wait until they were gone, drive to Philadelphia, and connect with Ben and my sister, Sophie, at a pre-arranged apartment. I could deliver the babies there, far away from this nightmare. I just had to make it through one more night. On Sunday, October 3rd, I heard them preparing for the gala. I stayed in the master suite, listening until the town car pulled away from the curb. I waited 15 minutes for good measure, then grabbed my purse, my heart pounding in my chest. I was almost to the garage when I saw the housekeeper, Maria, standing by the door. My stomach dropped. I thought you had the evening off. Mrs. Sterling asked me to stay. There was something odd in her tone, and she was holding my duffel bag. The one from my car. I found this when I was tidying the garage. Did you have a trip planned, Mrs. Sterling? Genevieve appeared in the archway from the living room, Liam right behind her. They weren't at the gala. It was all a charade, a trap. Running away? Genevieve asked, her voice laced with acid. You were going to take those children and disappear, weren't you? They are my children. A court will determine that, Liam said flatly, pulling out his phone to call his lawyers. Genevieve took my purse, removing my phone, my keys, and my credit cards. You won't be needing these, she said, not until after the paternity test confirms who those boys belong to. And if they aren't Liam's, you will leave this house with nothing. They led me across the courtyard to the renovated carriage house. It was sleek, modern, and utterly cold. They'd installed a keyless entry system, controlled by their phones. It's for your own safety, Genevieve said, her tone sickeningly sweet. You're clearly overwrought, trying to flee with children who may not even be part of this family. We're just ensuring you don't harm yourself, or them. The heavy oak door slid shut. The digital lock beeped. I was trapped, 35 weeks pregnant, locked in a gilded cage with no contact with the outside world. I collapsed onto the polished concrete floor as the reality crashed down on me. They would keep me here until I gave birth. Then they would take my sons and cast me aside. There was nothing I could do. This was the pinnacle of my despair. I was utterly and completely helpless. On October 10th, at 2 o'clock in the morning, now 37 weeks along, I woke up to a brutal, insistent pain. It was happening. These were real contractions, 5 minutes apart and getting stronger. I had been experiencing false labor for weeks. This was no false alarm. I was locked in a carriage house, about to have my babies all by myself. I banged on the reinforced windows, screaming for help. "Help me! Someone, please! The babies are coming!" The main house remained dark and silent, across the manicured lawn. I screamed until my throat was raw, pounding on the door. "Please! I'm in labor!" At last, the intercom on the wall crackled to life. Genevieve's irritated voice filled the space. "Stop this melodrama, Clara. Your due date is weeks away. The contractions are 5 minutes apart. The babies are on their way. It's Braxton Hicks. You'll be fine. Go drink some water." "I'm not fine." Another contraction ripped through me, and I buckled, crying out. There was a pause from the intercom, then a click as she disconnected the line. She had abandoned me. I don't know how many hours I spent on that floor. Time became a nightmarish soup of agony, fear, and the chilling realization that my children and I might not survive this. No one would even know. It was nearly 3:30 in the morning when I remembered the old tablet I'd seen tucked away in a desk. It had no cellular service, but it might still connect to the estate's wireless network. I crawled across the floor, my body shaking with contractions that were now every 2 minutes. I found the device, powered it on, and managed to connect to the guest Wi-Fi. I opened an emergency services app. I'm 37 weeks pregnant with twins, a high-risk pregnancy. I'm in active labor, and I'm locked in a carriage house, and I can't get out. The address is 2125 Orchard Street, Chicago. Please, you have to hurry. I hit send, praying it went through, praying someone would come. 20 minutes later, an agonizing eternity, I heard the faint wail of sirens growing closer, then loud banging on the estate's iron gates. "Paramedics! Police! Open the gate!" I could hear Genevieve's voice, attempting to sound reasonable. "Officers, I assure you, there's been some sort of mistake." A paramedic's voice cut her off. "We got a distress call from this property. A woman in labor. Where is she?" There was more shouting, then the sound of running feet. The carriage house door was forced open. 2 EMTs stopped dead in their tracks, their eyes wide as they saw me, 37 weeks pregnant, on a cold concrete floor, in the final stages of labor, sobbing uncontrollably. "Dear God," one of them whispered, "how long have you been locked in here?" "A week," I gasped, as another contraction tore through me. "Ma'am, we're taking you to the hospital right now." They loaded me onto a gurney. As they wheeled me out, I saw the Sterling family on the patio. Genevieve, Richard, and Liam, all dressed in silk pajamas, looking completely shocked. Genevieve tried to placate the police officer. "She's been emotionally volatile. We were merely providing her with a quiet space." "You locked a pregnant woman in a building," the officer demanded, his expression full of contempt. "While she was having a baby?" One of the EMTs shot a furious glare at Liam. "Once we have her stable at the hospital, we're making a call to Child and Family Services. This is criminal endangerment." Liam's face went white. At Northwestern Memorial, after 20 hours of excruciating labor, Liam finally appeared, looking at his watch. "Are you actually trying to manage a merger right now?" my delivery nurse asked him, appalled. "I needed something to keep me calm," he replied, his voice a sheet of ice. "After this is done, we're getting that paternity sample, immediately." I was in too much agony to argue. Another contraction took my breath away. Do you need me to go? He asked, clearly irritated. Yes, I choked out. Leave. He did, and he didn't return. At 1 a.m. on October 11th, my son Noah was born, weighing 6 pounds, 3 ounces. At 1:06, his brother Ethan arrived, 5 pounds, 15 ounces. Both were perfect. I held them to my chest, my face wet with tears. They were so tiny, so beautiful, so completely mine. Hello, my sweet boys, I whispered. Hello, I'm your mommy. I am so sorry. I am so sorry for what you have been through already. But I'm here now. Mommy has you, and I swear to you both, I will always, always protect you. The nurse asked if there was anyone I wanted to call. My husband was here, I said quietly. He had to leave. Oh, her face was a canvas of pity. I'm so sorry, dear. Is there anyone else? A friend? A family member? I thought of my sister, Sophie, but my phone was still in Genevieve's possession. They had stripped me of everything. No, I whispered, looking down at my sons. There's just us. And so I found myself in a sterile suite at a private Chicago hospital, cradling my newborn sons. The room was devoid of cheer, no mylar balloons, no congratulatory bouquets, and certainly no family. It was just me and my boys, a tiny new team against a very large world. I spent 4 days there, recovering from the emergency C-section. Oliver and James were healthy, but their low birth weight meant they needed monitoring. Marcus's sister, Isabel, made an appearance on day 2. She swept in, cast a brief look at the infants in their clear plastic bassinets, and said, "They have the sterling chin." She added, "That's a small mercy, I suppose. We're still moving forward with the evaluation, of course." She never touched them, never inquired about their names, never offered a word of congratulations. She was out the door in under 5 minutes. A text from a supposed friend, Alicia, chimed, "Hope you and the new assets are well." A winking face followed. Marcus himself showed up on the 3rd day, a portrait of cool indifference. He paused at the threshold, his gaze falling on his sons. "Have they been named?" he asked. "Oliver and James." He offered a curt nod. Suitable names. An oppressive silence stretched between us. "Marcus, please don't do this." "The observation period begins when you're home," he stated, his voice flat. "Until the doctors sign off on your stability, I refuse to form an attachment to liabilities." He turned and left. A hospital social worker stopped by later that day. "Mrs. Sterling, I need to ask, do you feel secure in your home environment?" I wanted to shout, "No!" I wanted to tell her about the guest wing, the key-coded doors, the constant surveillance, the gaslighting, all of it. But saying it aloud would trigger an investigation. They might place my babies in foster care while they untangled the web my powerful husband had spun. I could not bear the thought of losing them, so I lied through my teeth. "Yes, perfectly safe. It's just a stressful family situation." Her eyes lingered on my face, full of doubt. She knew I was holding back, but she had nothing to go on. "If things change, here's a number for a resource center." I accepted the card, sliding it into my purse with a quiet nod. When she departed, the silence returned. On day 4, October 10th, they discharged us. I phoned the estate. "I'm ready to come home." Isabel answered the call. "We're in the middle of a foundation gala planning meeting. Arrange for a car service." "I just had major surgery. I have 2 infants with me. I can't manage a car service alone." The line clicked dead. I ordered a Lyft XL. The driver, a woman with kind eyes, helped me secure the infant carriers I had shipped to the hospital. I sat in the back, my newborn twins beside me, the fresh pain from my incision, a sharp reminder with every bump in the road, taking a ride share back to a life I no longer recognized. As we passed through the iron gates of our Lake Forest estate, the sprawling mansion was completely dark. Not a single light on. The driver glanced back, her brow furrowed. "Are you sure you'll be all right, ma'am?" "I'll be fine, thank you." She helped me carry the boys to the grand front door. I gave her the last of the cash I had, and as her taillights disappeared down the long driveway, I stepped into my own gilded cage. Nothing had been touched. The nursery I had personally designed, with its custom millwork and hand-painted murals of the city skyline, was still a vacant room. The cribs were in flat-packed boxes, leaning against a wall. There was no welcome, no support, not a soul in sight. I placed the car seats in the center of the cavernous, empty living room. It felt like the only safe spot, and began the impossible task of assembling the cribs myself. 10 days post-op, my stitches pulling with every move, faint from blood loss. It took me 3 agonizing hours. I cried silently the entire time. That first night was a blur of 90-minute feeding cycles. My attempts at breastfeeding were a painful failure. They struggled to latch, their cries echoing in the silent house. I was exhausted, isolated, and in constant pain. Isabel appeared in my doorway at 6 in the morning. "You need to keep them quiet," she said, her eyes fixed on the hallway beyond. "Your noise is disrupting Marcus's sleep." "I'm not making noise. The babies are hungry, and I'm trying to feed them." "Then be more efficient about it," she snapped. "And when you're finished, the kitchen is a disaster. The staff from last night's fundraiser left it in a state. I just had a C-section." My mother-in-law, Genevieve, who had materialized behind her, scoffed. "Women of my breeding were overseeing households the next day. Stop being so fragile." She glided away, leaving me with my sons and the chilling realization that they expected me to manage it all. The twins, the mansion, the family's social obligations, while recovering from major abdominal surgery and barely able to walk. With no other option, I obeyed. The following days bled into one another in a fog of pain. On day 2, while trying to fix breakfast for the family holding a screaming Oliver, a sharp, searing pain shot from my incision. I was sure it was getting infected. On day 3, Isabel let the nursery door slam shut, moments after I had finally gotten both babies to sleep. They woke up wailing. When I gave her a desperate look, she offered a thin, cold smile. "So sorry. Had no idea they were down for a nap." On day 4, I spent a full 30 minutes with the breast pump to get enough milk for one feeding. I had just set the 2 small bottles on the counter when Isabel entered the kitchen, picked them up, and poured them both down the sink. "Whoops. Clumsy me," she said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. I stared, horrified. That was an hour of work. "Well, you'd better get back to it then. Or maybe just give up. Since your access to the family accounts for things like formula is currently under review." She sauntered out, humming a little tune. On day 5, I ran out of diapers and asked Marcus to pick some up on his way back from a downtown meeting. He never came home, texting that a development deal was going late. I was forced to use cut-up receiving blankets until I could get to a store myself the next day. By day 6, my C-section scar was inflamed, a hot, angry red line across my abdomen. I desperately needed antibiotics. I mentioned it to his mother, Genevieve, and she waved a hand dismissively. "It's just new mother anxiety. Don't be so theatrical." By day 7, I hadn't slept for more than 45 minutes at a time in a week. I was starting to hallucinate, seeing shadows darting at the edge of my vision. I dropped a glass bottle, and it shattered across the marble floor. I just stood there, staring at the glittering fragments, completely unable to think. Marcus walked in. "Have one of the maids handle that, would you? It's a safety issue." I looked at this man, a man who wore my husband's face but was a complete stranger. and felt a profound, terrifying numbness wash over me. On day 8, October 17th, at 3 in the morning, I was in the guest suite. They'd moved me there, claiming the babies were too much of a disturbance for the main residence. I was trying to feed James, while Oliver screamed from his bassinet. The infection from my surgery was now a raging fire. My fever had spiked to 103 degrees. I was shivering uncontrollably, dizzy, and barely lucid. My sons were both crying, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd had water or food or any real sleep. My eyes fell on the balcony off the third-floor suite, on the thick, swirling mist rolling in off Lake Michigan. I could see the simple latch on the French doors. It would take 10 seconds. The thought was a siren's call in its simplicity. Open the doors, walk out, lie down with my babies, and just drift off. An end to this waking nightmare. All three of us, finally at peace, away from this cold, cruel house. Oliver was crying. James was crying. I was crying. Everything was pain. Everything was impossible. My hand was reaching for the handle when Oliver went quiet. He looked directly at me with his impossibly large blue eyes, Marcus's eyes, and let out a tiny, soft coo. In that instant, something inside me didn't just crack. It shattered and reforged itself into steel. "No," I whispered to the empty room. "No. Mommy's not giving up. Mommy is going to fight. Mommy is getting us out of here." I used the very last of my strength to pound on the locked connecting door for 20 solid minutes, screaming and hitting it until my knuckles were bruised and bleeding. At last, Isabel wrenched it open, her face a perfect mask of annoyance. "What is all this commotion?" And then she saw me. She saw the fever-bright eyes, the sheen of sweat on my skin, the blood that had seeped through my nightgown, the wailing infant in my arms. For one fleeting moment, she actually looked scared. "I need a doctor. The infection. I'm dying. Please." She called Genevieve, who then called their on-call physician, but framed it as, "My daughter-in-law is having a hysterical episode over some post-operative discomfort. But you should probably check on her, for the children's sake." The doctor arrived, took one look at my condition, and immediately called for a private ambulance. At the emergency room, the on-duty doctor was aghast. "Your incision is septic. You have a systemic blood infection. You could have died. Who has been overseeing your recovery?" I was just not thinking clearly. "You've undergone major surgery. Where is your husband? Your family?" A hospital administrator came to my room. "Mrs. Sterling, this is deeply concerning. We're seeing evidence of severe postpartum neglect. I have to ask you, and I need you to answer honestly. Is there anyone at home who is hurting you?" I looked at my sons, sleeping peacefully in their hospital bassinet, and I thought about what the truth would unleash. Social services, a brutal custody fight, a public immolation in the press. No. So I lied. I haven't been taking proper care of myself. I'll do better, I promise." She didn't believe a word of it, but she had no proof. They pumped me full of intravenous antibiotics for 18 hours, cleaned and redressed the wound, and gave me strict orders to rest. And then they sent me back to the estate, back to the isolated guest suite, back to my personal hell. I had 2 days left before my world would be utterly demolished. 2 more days of the most meticulously planned cruelty I could ever imagine. I was completely unaware that things were about to get catastrophically worse. On November 3rd, the 9th day of my son's existence, Chloe Vance, the venture capitalist Liam had been meeting with, executed her final, brutal move. Through a tech contact, she had engineered a set of devastatingly convincing forgeries. There were manufactured screenshots of encrypted chats, allegedly from me to an unknown lover. There was fabricated crypto data showing large, untraceable transfers from a wallet linked to my name. But the main attraction, the most venomous piece of the puzzle, was a masterfully crafted deepfake video. Chloe had used bleeding-edge AI to manipulate footage of me at a coffee shop, making it appear as if I was confessing corporate secrets and planning a future with a rival executive. The result was flawless, brilliant, and absolutely soul-crushing. Beatrice presented this evidence to Liam that evening. I was oblivious, tucked away in the nursery suite with the twins, just hoping to get a few hours of sleep. Liam watched the video. His expression shifted from shock to a deep crimson flush, to a terrifyingly serene calm that was far more frightening than any outburst. I want her gone. Tonight. Even his mother looked momentarily surprised. Liam, it's the middle of the night. I want her out of this house, now, her, and those two boys, who are so obviously not my children. Darling, we need to think this through. I don't care. I want her gone before I do something I will regret for the rest of my life. Victoria then sent the video file to a junior analyst at Chloe's firm, their eyewitness, who promptly provided a signed affidavit, confirming she'd witnessed me meeting the man on 6 separate occasions. They had their story. It was airtight. It was a complete fabrication, but Liam was desperate for a reason to believe it. Accepting that I was a traitor was infinitely simpler than confronting the possibility that his own family was methodically destroying an innocent woman. I was burping Oliver while Ethan slept when the nursery door was flung open. The entire Sterling family stood silhouetted in the doorway. Liam, Beatrice, Victoria, and Edward, their father. Their faces were masks of cold, unified disgust. My heart began to pound against my ribs like a trapped bird. Something was profoundly wrong. Victoria spoke first, her phone held out like a piece of evidence. It's over, Anna. We know everything. We have the definitive proof. She played the video. My face, my voice, but not my words. It was a distorted, monstrous version of me, admitting to betrayals I'd never committed, confessing to a love I'd never felt. That's not real. That's a deep fake. It's been manipulated. Beatrice started to shriek. Liar! We have a witness. We have the crypto records. We know you've been selling my son's company secrets from the beginning. Victoria aimed a shaking finger at my boys. And those babies, they're not even Sterling's. You brought bastards into our home. You fooled every single one of us. Liam's face was unreadable, carved from ice. I'm ordering a paternity test, first thing in the morning. Liam, please, you have to listen to me. This is a frame job. Someone is setting me up. Beatrice let out a harsh, barking laugh. Oh, right. A massive conspiracy against little, insignificant you? Or is it far more plausible that you're just a common two-timing snake? Edward stepped forward, his voice dangerously quiet. Liam, perhaps this can wait until daylight. No, Liam stated, his tone final. She leaves this house, tonight. I hugged Oliver tighter and took a step toward the bassinet where Ethan was stirring. It's after midnight. It's snowing outside. These are newborn infants, your sons. Please, Liam, whatever you think I've done, don't take it out on them. Victoria moved toward the bassinet. Maybe the children should remain here. We'll get the paternity test done. If they carry the Sterling name, this is where they belong, but you have to go. A sharp, cold dread, more intense than any physical pain, seized me. They were planning to take my babies. No. I quickly scooped Ethan from his bassinet, holding both my sons tightly in my arms. You will not lay a hand on them. They are my children. Beatrice's face contorted with rage. They are nothing. They are the result of your disgusting affair. Get them out of my sight. Out. She actually lunged at me, her hands like claws, trying to wrench one of the babies from my arms. I twisted away, using my body as a shield. Beatrice's hand connected with my cheek in a sharp, stinging slap that made my head ring. Liam grabbed her and pulled her back. Mother, that's enough. But a line had been irrevocably crossed. She had struck me while I was holding my newborn children. Edward opened the heavy front door. A blast of frigid, damp November air swept into the foyer. The temperature had plunged to 25 degrees. "Leave us," he said, his voice completely devoid of emotion. I looked at Liam one final time. My husband, the man I had loved, the father of my boys. "They are 9 days old, Liam. She's only 6 weeks behind me, Ethan. The appointment was on our shared calendar, with my doctor." For a split second, the mask of the tech mogul slipped, and I saw a flicker of the man I loved. Panic, even regret. But then Chloe laid a hand on his arm, and his face went cold and impassive. He turned to me, his voice flat. "This is a private matter." He nodded to the building's security chief, who stepped forward. I backed away, my hand flying to my stomach, shielding our unborn son. "Ethan, please," I whispered, my voice breaking. He didn't push me. He didn't have to. The security guard simply took my elbow, his grip firm but polite, and began leading me toward the door of our penthouse. The sterile, air-conditioned hallway felt impossibly cold. Chloe appeared at the doorway, her expression a mask of triumph. She looked me up and down, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. "He's upgrading," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "You're last year's model, and this is the end of your product cycle." The heavy steel door clicked shut with an expensive, silent finality. I heard the electronic lock engage. The hallway lights seemed to dim. I stood there, clutching a useless keycard, disoriented and bleeding from a stress-induced nosebleed. My world had just been liquidated. My son was due in 2 months, and I had just been escorted out of my own home. I couldn't feel my legs. I felt a warm trickle of blood run down my leg where the stress had torn my C-section stitches. We were going to perish out here. This was the end. And then a profound shift occurred within me. The tears froze on my cheeks. I looked up at the dark, monolithic brownstone, at the family inside, who were surely returning to their warm beds without a second thought for the woman and 2 babies freezing on their doorstep. And I felt something cold and hard form in the center of my chest. It wasn't fear. It wasn't hopelessness. It was rage. Pure, crystalline, ice-cold rage. I whispered to my sons, "Mommy has you." "Mommy is going to fix this," I murmured. "I promise you, they will rue this day. Every single one of them." Balancing my newborn sons in the crook of one arm, I used my free hand to pull my burner phone from the diaper bag. This was the device they had no knowledge of, my connection to my actual life. I dialed a single number. "Marcus, it's me. I'm out. It's time. Come get us." "Ava? My God, what's your location?" 18 Commonwealth Avenue, on the steps. "He kicked us out, Marcus. Me and the boys. We're freezing. Please hurry." "I'm 3 minutes away. Don't move." I hung up, pulling my robe tighter around my sons, attempting to shield them from the relentless wind. I whispered to them, "Oliver, Ethan, Mommy swears to you, you will never be cold again. You will never be scared again. You will never be hurt again. And the people who did this to us, they will pray they were never born." A pair of headlights sliced through the darkness as a blacked-out Escalade pulled silently to the curb. Jenna, my chief of staff, jumped out of the passenger side as Marcus emerged from the driver's seat. "Oh, Ava, my God!" Jenna was already crying, wrapping a thick wool blanket around me and the babies. Marcus was already on his phone. "I need a neonatal response team at the Newberry penthouse immediately. 2 infants, 9 days old, with signs of cold exposure." They guided us into the vehicle, where the heated leather seats began to thaw my frozen limbs. Jenna took one of the babies, while I held the other, their cries finally quieting in the warmth. As we drove off, I cast one last glance at the house. A light flickered on in an upstairs window. Perhaps it was Liam. Perhaps it was his mother, Beatrice. A faint smile touched my lips. It was not a smile of joy, but the smile of a queen who had just been handed a declaration of war. "Marcus," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "I want you to dismantle them. Everything. Legally, financially, and permanently. Can you do that?" He met my gaze in the rearview mirror. "Yes, Ava, I can." "Then begin. Leave no asset untouched. Show no quarter," I added. "And what about Liam? He is currently your husband." I looked down at Ethan in my arms, then at Oliver cradled by Jenna. My perfect, innocent children, thrown out like trash, by the man who should have been their ultimate protector. "Especially Liam," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I want him to understand the true scope of what he has lost. I want that realization to be the very first thing he experiences every morning for the rest of his pathetic life." The woman known as Anna Scott, the quiet freelance artist, ceased to exist on that frozen Boston sidewalk. Ava Sinclair, the billionaire founder of Aura Dynamics, was back, and she was demanding a reckoning. We sped toward the Seaport District, a 20-minute drive from Beacon Hill. My real world was centered in the city, the penthouse of the St. Regis building. I owned the entire tower, a detail the Sterling family was completely ignorant of. Marcus had already secured the suite under a pseudonym. When we stepped from the private elevator, a full medical staff was assembled and waiting, a neonatal specialist, a pediatrician, and an obstetrician for me. The pediatrician examined Oliver and Ethan. "They're stable," he announced with relief. "They're stressed from the cold, but there's no hypothermia. They will be just fine." The obstetrician then checked me, her expression turning serious as she assessed my reopened incision. "This is not good. You need to be on an IV antibiotic drip right away. You're also severely dehydrated. You've lost a dangerous amount of blood, Mrs. Hayes. We need to get you to a proper medical facility." "I'm not going anywhere," I said, my voice firm. "Not until I've handled something." The private nurse looked ready to protest, but the look in my eyes must have stopped her. She just nodded slowly. "Very well, but I will not leave your side. I'll be monitoring your vitals constantly." My assistant, Gabrielle, took the twin boys gently. "I have them, Catherine. You need to rest." But rest was the furthest thing from my mind. "Daniel," I said, looking at my head of security, "get the war room on a secure line. Now." In less than 2 hours, my inner circle was assembled on a video conference displayed on the suite's media wall. Daniel Carter, my security chief, Marcus Thorne, my lead counsel, Diana Finch, a notoriously aggressive litigator, Evelyn Reed, my head of public relations, and Leo Petrov, my private forensic accountant. I sat before the screen in a black silk dressing gown Gabrielle had laid out, an item that cost more than $5,000. I looked less like a patient and more like a monarch holding court. I felt my power returning. "Thank you for joining on such short notice, Wei," I stated, my voice even. "For the past 2 years, most of you have known me as Catherine Miller. That name is no longer operative. I am Catherine Sterling, founder of Sterling Capital. I require your expertise to systematically dismantle the lives of the individuals who just left me and my newborn sons for dead." I clicked a button, and the massive screen filled with portraits of the Hayes family. Objective 1, Liam Hayes. Objective 2, Evelyn Hayes. Objective 3, Olivia Hayes. Objective 4, Robert Hayes. Leo spoke first, his voice crisp. "Ma'am, as requested 3 months ago, I completed the preliminary financial workups. The results are on your screen now." Liam was a lead architect at a firm whose largest projects were all financed through a subsidiary of Sterling Capital. He also had a secret gambling addiction, with debts totaling over $63,000 to an online sports betting ring. Evelyn was the director of a prestigious art gallery that received its primary funding from a charitable foundation I controlled, a foundation from which she had been siphoning funds to the tune of $250,000. She maintained a hidden portfolio of assets in Switzerland. Olivia's sustainable fashion influencer brand was hosted on a media platform my company had a majority stake in. She owed $70,000 on business loans, and her former business partner had filed a restraining order against her for harassment. Robert's boutique wine advisory firm was almost entirely dependent on referrals from hospitality groups I owned. He was also underwater, with gambling debts close to $90,000. I leaned back, letting my team absorb the information. Their entire world is built on my money, I said softly, and they cast me out. Diana, my litigator, spoke next. I've reviewed the audio files you've been gathering from the home security system. We have irrefutable evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud, not to mention assault, defamation, forgery, and reckless endangerment. We can file criminal complaints against every last one of them. Marcus, my corporate lawyer, added, from a corporate standpoint, we can trigger ethics clauses to terminate Liam's architectural contracts, initiate a forensic audit of the gallery's foundation, which would expose Evelyn, deplatform Olivia's business for terms of service violations, and sever all of Robert's contracts with our hospitality groups. We can also alert Swiss authorities to Evelyn's undeclared assets. It's all perfectly legal, and the effect will be immediate. Evelyn Reed, my PR chief, smiled, and I can craft a media narrative that will be legendary. Visionary CEO, betrayed by the family of the man she loved, left to die with her infant sons, rises from the ashes to reclaim her empire. The secret recordings of their plotting are pure gold. This story will dominate the global news cycle for weeks. I took exactly 3 seconds to decide. Execute on all fronts. I want them to wake up tomorrow and find themselves in a crater where their lives used to be. I want it done by the book, in the full glare of the public eye, with every document leaked. The world needs to see them for what they are. Daniel looked uneasy. Catherine, this is a scorched earth strategy. We could achieve the same results discreetly. I don't want discretion, I snapped. I want them broken. I want them so thoroughly ruined that the name Hayes becomes a cautionary tale. I want them to feel, intimately, what it's like to have everything taken away, to have it all vanish in an instant, just as they intended for me. Diana nodded, a cold, satisfied smile playing on her lips. Then the operation begins tomorrow, March 15th, the morning of the Urban Architecture Symposium. I smiled back. Excellent. Let their day begin in utter ruin. The next morning, March 15th, Liam woke at 6 a.m. to a series of urgent texts. The senior partners at his firm demanded his presence for an emergency board meeting. He arrived at 7. The managing partner's face was grim. Liam, our firm's primary financing partner, Sterling Capital, has invoked its majority shareholder rights. They did a full audit of our projects overnight. Your employment is terminated, effective immediately, for gross professional misconduct. You were recorded conspiring to defraud your wife and knowingly signed off on substandard materials for 3 major construction projects. Sterling Capital has a zero-tolerance policy for fraud and corruption. Liam's face went pale. What? How? Your severance is $0 because this is a for-cause termination. Our security team will escort you out. Liam was out on the street by 7:30 a.m. No career, no money, no reputation. He got to his car and found a thick manila envelope, tucked under the wiper blade. Inside were divorce filings and a petition for sole custody of their children. A small note was clipped to the front. The boys are Sterling's. You forfeited any right to call yourself their father when you left them to freeze. Lab-certified DNA reports were included. A 99.9% match. Congratulations. You just destroyed your own bloodline. Catherine. He stumbled against the side of his car and threw up on the pavement. Evelyn was arranging a new exhibit when the gallery's owner arrived at 8 o'clock, flanked by 2 police officers. He handed her an official letter. It was a notice of termination. She was being fired, pending a criminal investigation into art fraud and embezzlement. She had to leave immediately. She called the foundation's director. You have to fix this. There's nothing to fix, Evelyn. Our primary benefactor, the Sterling Foundation, ordered a full audit. They found everything. You have 1 hour to clear out your personal effects. Who is the Sterling Foundation? I'm not at liberty to say. She hung up, her hands shaking. A moment later, an officer stepped forward. Evelyn Hayes? Yes? You're under arrest for wire fraud, conspiracy, and trafficking in forged art. They cuffed her hands behind her back as they read her Miranda rights. Robert watched in horror as his wife was placed in a police car. Bail was set at $500,000. It was an impossible sum for Robert. She would stay in a jail cell. Olivia was filming a new post for her social media at 9 a.m. when all of her accounts suddenly went dead. An eviction notice was plastered on the door of her trendy downtown loft. The entire building was being shut down by the city for immediate code remediation. All residents must evacuate the property within 24 hours. She got a frantic call from the property manager. What's happening? The new owners, Sterling Properties Group, did a full structural survey. The place is a death trap. Faulty wiring, asbestos, foundation cracks. It's a miracle it's still standing. She ran into her apartment to grab her laptop and saw an envelope had been slipped under the door. It was a summons for a civil lawsuit alleging defamation, copyright infringement, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The plaintiff was Catherine Sterling. The suit sought damages of $5 million. Attached was a complete forensic analysis of the bot farms she used to inflate her engagement numbers, bank statements, tracing her payments to the service, and transcripts of her text messages with her co-conspirators. Everything. She crumpled to the floor in a heap. They had everything. Robert got 3 calls in 10 minutes that morning. His top 3 clients were terminating their services. His bank was calling in his business loan, which had been sold overnight to Sterling Financial. Within the span of a few hours, Robert had lost 90% of his business and was now on the hook for a debt of over $200,000, due in full. He called Liam. It's a coordinated attack. Someone is systematically destroying us. Liam's voice was a dead, hollowed-out rasp. I know who it is. Who? Catherine, he managed to say. It's all Catherine. Catherine, your wife? The freelance designer? How could she possibly do this? I don't think she was ever a freelance designer, Dad, Liam said, his voice breaking. I don't think we ever knew who she was at all. They met at the house, Robert, Olivia, and Liam. Evelyn was in jail. They sat in the very living room where they had plotted my demise, where they had called me pathetic. Robert spoke first. This Sterling person is tearing our family apart. Who in God's name is Sterling? Olivia looked up from her phone, her face ashen. Catherine's maiden name. It's Sterling. A thick, suffocating silence filled the room. Liam just shook his head in denial. No, it's not possible. She's a nobody. Did you ever once run a real background check on her? Robert demanded. No. Did you ever truly know anything about her? Liam's face collapsed. My God, What have we done? Olivia frantically typed into her phone, searching for Catherine Sterling, CEO, when the business news channel on the television cut to a special report. And in breaking business news, a stunning corporate raid today as the private equity giant Sterling Capital has successfully acquired a controlling interest in the Hayes Hospitality and Development Group, a deal valued at $2.5 billion. The screen behind the news anchor changed, showing a professional headshot. Leading the acquisition is the firm's famously private founder and CEO, making her first public statement in over 2 years. Catherine Sterling. Harriet Sterling! The spotlight flooded the stage, and Julian's champagne flute shattered on the marble floor. It was Arya, his broke, aimless wife, whom he'd just thrown out into a freezing Seattle storm. No, that's not possible, he breathed, but it was happening. Every massive screen in the grand ballroom showed her face, radiating a calm and unnerving power. Arya Sterling, the reclusive genius behind Ethelred AI, Arya Sterling, the multi-billionaire titan of tech. And they had called her a worthless gold digger. They had tormented her. They had cast her and his children, his newborn daughters, into the icy rain because they thought she was nobody. His sister, Isabel, whispered what they were all thinking: "We're ruined. We are completely and utterly ruined." Julian stared at the enormous screen showing Arya, not the simple, quiet woman he knew, but Arya Sterling, looking commanding, brilliant, and untouchable. He had tried to crush her spirit, and in doing so, had handed her the perfect stage to publicly annihilate him. And this was just the overture. On December 26th, 2 days after Christmas, the alert hit every news server at 9 in the morning. Ethelred A. is notoriously private CEO, Arya Sterling, to deliver keynote at the Seattle Future Gala at 8 p.m. regarding a major corporate restructuring. The media frenzy was instantaneous. The Wall Street Journal, TechCrunch, Bloomberg, every major network, and local Seattle affiliate scrambled for press passes. Tech analysts, society columnists, no one was sure what the announcement was. But when the head of a secretive, multi-billion-dollar AI firm made their first public appearance in a decade, it was global news. The venue was the Cascade Ballroom at the Convention Center, capacity 4,000. Every seat was filled. I was in a penthouse suite at the Fairmont Olympic, making my final preparations. My chief of staff, Leo, adjusted the shoulder of my emerald green gown, a custom piece from Balmain, green for rebirth, for prosperity. My hair and makeup were impeccable. I looked like the person I had always been, a leader, a strategist. The twins were safe with their pediatric nurse and 2 security guards in the connected suite, completely protected. My lead counsel, Marcus, entered the room. "Are you certain about this, Arya? Once you walk onto that stage, you can never take it back." "I'm certain," I replied. "The security footage is crystal clear. People will be horrified. This will be on every phone in the world within an hour." "Excellent," I said. "I want it on every phone. I want the world to see what they did." I took one last look in the mirror. This was the moment I seized control of the narrative, the moment I took back my name. Let's begin. I walked onto that stage at 8 o'clock precisely. A deep hush settled over the massive hall, punctuated by a galaxy of camera flashes. I scanned the sea of investors, journalists, and industry rivals, and walked to the lectern. I adjusted the microphone and looked directly into the lens of the primary broadcast camera. "My name is Arya Sterling. I am the founder and CEO of Ethelred AI, a machine learning company currently valued at $8.2 billion. I am 34 years old. I built this company from the ground up after my parents died in a plane crash 10 years ago." I paused, allowing the weight of that to settle. I am also the woman you may have seen in footage that has just been released to the press. Footage of me being forcibly removed from my home after midnight on Christmas Eve, with my 5-day-old twin daughters in 37-degree torrential rain. Footage of me, still recovering from an emergency C-section, standing on a flooded sidewalk, bleeding through my clothes, holding my crying newborns, pleading not to be abandoned like trash. The room erupted with shouted questions. I raised a hand. Please, allow me to finish my story. There will be ample time for questions later. Silence returned. 5 years ago, I met a man named Julian Croft. I told him everything. I detailed my decision to hide my identity, the relentless emotional abuse during my pregnancy, the forged paternity test, the times his sister locked me in a cold basement storage room, the birth of our daughters, and finally, the expulsion. As I spoke, the large screens behind me came to life. Hidden camera recordings and audio clips filled the ballroom. The audience watched in shocked silence as Isabel deliberately spilled a pot of scalding hot coffee, narrowly missing my pregnant stomach. As Julian's mother, Eleanor, dumped my pumped breast milk into the sink, calling it commoner's milk. They heard the family plotting to pay a lab technician for a fake paternity report, then watched them present me with it. They saw Isabel spit in my face, and Julian shoved me out the front door into the storm, my daughters in my arms. By the time the final clip played of me shivering on the sidewalk, many in the room were openly weeping. The rest looked utterly enraged. When the screens went dark, I spoke again. They cast me out based on a document they paid to have forged. They refused to listen to me. They chose to believe a lie they had manufactured, rather than trust the mother of their own children and grandchildren. I let the silence hang heavy in the air. What the Croft family was unaware of, when they threw me away, was that they live in a luxury high-rise I own. They operate businesses that are funded by my venture capital firm. Their entire extravagant lifestyle is underwritten by my silent generosity. A wave of gasps and frantic whispers swept the hall. Julian Croft is a real estate developer at a firm my family office acquired 3 years ago. His parents, Lawrence and Eleanor, live rent-free in a penthouse I own, managed through a private trust. Isabel Croft's art consultancy firm is funded entirely by a small business grant from a foundation I created. Their very survival was dependent on my goodwill. I let that information land like a bomb. And they repaid that goodwill by tormenting me through a high-risk pregnancy, by conspiring to brand me an adulteress, and by throwing me and my infant daughters into a freezing storm on Christmas Eve, just 5 days after I underwent major surgery, while I was weak, bleeding, and vulnerable. My voice grew stronger, colder, but I am not a victim. I am a mother who will defend her children. I am a CEO who will not be broken. And I am a woman who refuses to be erased. I clicked to the next slide, showing professional headshots of Julian, Isabel, Lawrence, and Eleanor. Effective today, I am filing for divorce from Julian Croft and seeking sole custody of our daughters. I am pursuing criminal charges for child endangerment and reckless endangerment against all 4 of them. I am also filing charges of forgery and conspiracy against Isabel Croft for creating the fraudulent evidence, and embezzlement charges against Eleanor Croft for misappropriating over $200,000. Civil suits for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress will be filed against all 4. Finally, all financial ties between myself and the Croft family are hereby permanently severed, and I am making a $10 million initial donation to launch the Sterling Haven for Mothers, a foundation dedicated to providing shelter, legal aid, and career support for abused mothers and their children. The room erupted. I held up a hand one last time. I am telling this story not merely for retribution, though accountability will be absolute. I am telling it because abuse does not care about your income bracket. It happens to powerful women and poor women, to women with PhDs and women who never finished high school. It hides behind the gates of mansions and the doors of apartments. If you are experiencing this, please know, document everything. Trust your instincts. Protect yourself with legal counsel. Create a safe exit strategy. And never forget that you are worthy of more. You are worthy of safety, respect, and love. Do not ever accept anything less. Thank you. I walked off the stage into a maelstrom. Within 30 minutes, the speech was the #1 global news story. Hashtag Sterling Storm. Hashtag Croft is over. Hashtag the CEO's revenge. The videos received over 300 million views in the first 24 hours. Every network led with the story. Tech's most secretive CEO reveals horrific abuse in shocking public debut. Real estate mogul's family evicts billionaire, heiress, and newborns into a storm, unaware she was their benefactor. The story went viral. Op-eds, think pieces, and a social media inferno. Famous entrepreneurs weighed in. Mark Cuban tweeted, "This is how you handle business. A masterclass in leverage." Shonda Rhimes posted, "Let this be a lesson. Never underestimate a woman with a plan." The Crofts couldn't leave their penthouse. Reporters were camped outside. Their cell numbers were leaked, and they were deluged with messages of pure vitriol, which I publicly asked people to stop sending. Julian tried to go to Whole Foods for groceries and was instantly recognized. People followed him down the aisles with their phones. "You threw your own babies out in the pouring rain." "What kind of man kicks out his wife right after surgery?" "She was a billionaire, you moron, and you treated her like she was nothing." He fled the store, empty-handed, and returned home, a prisoner in the penthouse I owned. Isabel, out on bail, tried to defend herself on Instagram, writing, "She was the one lying to us for years." The comments were savage. "So you abuse a pregnant woman because she's secretly rich?" "She was testing your character, and you all failed in the most epic way possible. Those babies were 5 days old. You threw them into a freezing storm. You are a monster." The Crofts became the most loathed family in Seattle overnight. The stock for Ethelred AI, ironically, jumped 15% after the gala. Wall Street adored the story of a brilliant, resilient CEO who decisively eliminated threats to her company and family. I was invited everywhere. A special on 60 Minutes, an interview with Kara Swisher, a guest spot on The Daily Show. I was on the cover of Forbes. The Strategist. How Arya Sterling turned personal betrayal into a global movement. I became a symbol, not of money or revenge, but of strength, strategy, and the power of owning your own truth. The Crofts also became symbols of arrogance, of cruelty, and of the devastating consequences of underestimating a woman. Their reputations were ruined. 3 days later, on January 3rd, the authorities moved in. Eleanor was charged with endangering a minor, unlawful restraint, assault, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Serena was charged with endangering a minor, wire fraud, and defamation. Liam was charged with endangering a minor and assault. Arthur Thorne was never charged. He gave his full cooperation, providing a detailed statement and promising to testify against his wife and children. The legal process was swift. The evidence against them was overwhelming. The raw audio recordings were absolutely damning. During Eleanor's trial, the prosecutor played the recording of her plotting the fake photo shoot and showed the restaurant's security footage of her screaming at me. A medical expert confirmed that the intense stress and physical confrontation she initiated directly triggered dangerous complications in my high-risk pregnancy. A building inspector testified that the wine cellar she locked me in was a hazardous, unventilated space. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. The verdict came back, guilty on every charge. The judge's voice filled the courtroom. Mrs. Thorne, in my 23 years of service, I have seldom encountered a case with such methodical and heartless familial cruelty. You deliberately targeted a vulnerable expectant mother and knowingly endangered the lives of her unborn children. Eleanor remained stone-faced, but a 16-year federal prison term caused Serena to collapse into hysterics. "That monster is a snake," she screamed. "She got exactly what she deserved." The judge responded flatly, "Your own son was the one who needed to be saved from you." At Serena's federal trial, a digital forensics expert authenticated the doctored text messages. The private investigator, a man named Marco Diaz, testified in return for a reduced sentence. "She paid me $30,000, he stated. She wanted me to fabricate a digital footprint that would obliterate her sister-in-law's career." The messages between them were projected for the entire court to see. Serena had written, "Make it look like she's a cheating con artist." Marco replied, "This will be catastrophic for her." Serena texted back, "Excellent. I want her annihilated." The verdict was guilty. She was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison and ordered to pay a $50,000 fine. At Liam's trial, his lawyer claimed he was a victim of his mother's psychological manipulation. But the prosecutor presented the security video from our front door. Liam, shoving me down onto the rain-slicked porch, his expression utterly cold. I was called to the witness stand, seeing him for the first time since that horrible night. The prosecutor asked, "Mrs. Davenport, could you please describe for the court what occurred on the evening of November 5th? I was poised and steady." My husband forced me out of our shared home. I was 37 weeks pregnant with twins. I was in the early stages of labor. I was on the verge of giving birth to our sons. The temperature was 45 degrees amid a torrential downpour. He shoved me. Then he turned around, went inside, locked the door, and shot the deadbolt. The prosecutor continued, "And did he communicate anything to you?" I answered. "He yelled that he had no idea whose children I was pregnant with." I had assured him time and time again they were his. I had volunteered to take a paternity test the instant they were born. He made the choice to believe a fabrication instead of trusting me, instead of protecting his own sons. The prosecutor then asked, "And what was your emotional state at that moment?" I turned my head and looked straight at Liam for the first time, betrayed, horrified, and completely, utterly abandoned. Liam began to sob uncontrollably at the defendant's table. The verdict was guilty of reckless endangerment, although he was acquitted on the charge of assault. The jury was persuaded that he had been heavily manipulated. His sentence was 5 years of probation, mandatory psychological counseling, and supervised visitation only. $5,000 a month in child support. The judge added, "Mr. Davenport, your stunning lack of conviction created the opening for the horrific abuse of your wife and your unborn sons. You were too much of a coward to stand against your mother. You chose your allegiance to a predator over the well-being of your own family. I suggest you use every moment of your supervised visits to contemplate precisely what you threw away." I subsequently filed a civil suit against all 3 of them for emotional damages. A jury granted me $5 million from Eleanor, $2 million from Serena, and $1 million from Liam. I donated every single dollar to the Hearthstone Project. "I have no interest in their tainted money," I explained to the reporters. "I want them to understand that actions have consequences. I want other abusers to witness what happens when they choose the wrong person to victimize." It is a late afternoon in spring. during that perfect golden hour. My penthouse apartment looks out over the San Francisco Bay with a rooftop garden I had installed right after I moved in. Noah and Lucas, my sons, are toddling across the soft lawn, trying to catch bubbles that their godmother, Chloe, is blowing. Chloe's daughter, Sophia, who is now 5, is teaching them the best way to pop them. I'm observing from a teak bench, dressed in old jeans and a worn-out culinary school sweatshirt, with no makeup on and my hair in a messy ponytail. I feel a profound sense of tranquility. Chloe finishes with the bubbles and joins me on the bench. "Are you really okay today?" she asks. "Yeah, it's a good one," I answer. Dr. Evans says I'm making significant progress. I'm sleeping through the entire night, more often than not. The panic attacks are finally starting to subside. "That's amazing," she says. We watch the kids run around. "You know, it's okay to not be okay," she says softly. "You don't have to act like the invincible celebrity chef around the clock." I offer a small, weary smile. I am so done with people calling me resilient. I don't feel resilient. I feel like I'm held together by spite and espresso. "That's just called being a human," Chloe says, "and that's infinitely more resilient than faking that you have everything under control." At that moment, Noah stumbles and lands on his bottom, then starts to cry. I'm beside him in a flash, scooping him into my arms and checking him for scrapes. "You're okay, my sweet boy. It was just a little fall." Look, nothing is broken. Noah's tears slow to a stop. He rubs his runny nose on my sweatshirt, squirms to be let down, and immediately runs back to the game. "You are an incredible mother, you know that?" Chloe says. I look at my sons, my chest tightening with love. "I'm a terrified mother," I correct her. "I wake up scared every single day. Scared someone might try to harm them. Scared I'm going to ruin them. Scared I'm not enough for them." "That's called love," Chloe says. "It's a sign you're doing it exactly right." A car pulls into the private garage below, and Arthur climbs out, carrying a small gift bag. I feel that old, familiar tightness in my shoulders. A reflex. He had texted, "I'm running a bit early. Should I wait downstairs?" I had replied, "No, it's fine. Come on up." Arthur rides the elevator up to the rooftop. The boys see him and start running. "Grandpa!" He gets down on his knees, his posture slow and deliberate. "Hello, my boys. See what I brought for you." He takes out 2 small, intricately carved wooden cable cars. The boys are delighted. He sits on the grass with them, demonstrating how the little wheels turn, making quiet little ding-ding noises, while the boys squeal with laughter. Chloe watches him like a hawk. She will never forgive him. "Are you positive about this?" she whispers. "He testified against them," I answer in a low voice. "He told the complete, unedited truth. He is making an effort." And the boys deserve to have at least one grandparent who isn't a complete monster. He stood by and allowed that woman to destroy his family for 40 years, she points out. I know, but he is also the only one who has demonstrated a single shred of true remorse. The only one putting in the actual work. So, I am giving him this. It is supervised, it is brief, but I am giving him this opportunity. Arthur glances up, and our eyes meet. He mouths the words, "Thank you." I give him a very small nod. My phone buzzes. It's a text from a number I don't recognize. I know I shouldn't, but I open it. I know I have no right to ask. I know I wrecked everything precious in our lives. But please, just speak to me one more time. Let me attempt to explain. Let me say I'm sorry to your face. I am begging you, Olivia. Please. It's from Liam. I look at the text on the screen for a very long time. Chloe leans in to read it. "Are you going to respond?" she asks. "No." "Good," she says. He's looking for absolution to make himself feel less guilty for what he did. That isn't your burden to carry anymore. My burden is to protect my sons. And I can't do that by allowing the man who would have let them be born on a cold, wet porch back into our world. But what if he's genuinely different? What if he's truly sorry? Then he can show it by respecting my decision, by paying his child support without a reminder, by showing up to his supervised visits, clear-eyed and on schedule, by doing the difficult work without needing me to be his cheerleader. I delete the text and block the number. I don't feel hatred for him now. I just feel a complete void when I think of him. And that, right there, is the definition of freedom. We sit in a peaceful silence for a minute, watching our children play as the sun sinks toward the horizon. My restaurant group has grown to a $50 million valuation. I have been on the cover of Food and Wine magazine 3 times. The Hearthstone Project now operates culinary centers in 8 different states. We have assisted 2,847 women and their children over the last 18 months, and we are expanding every single day. I make it a point to personally mentor survivors of domestic abuse. I give keynote speeches. I tell my story. I have started dating again, but just casually. Nothing serious. I am not ready for that yet. I told Chloe, maybe someday. But right now, my sons and my work are more than enough. Liam was permanently barred from the financial industry. He works as a clerk for a small shipping company for $20 an hour. He rents a tiny studio apartment in an industrial part of the city. He sees his sons once a month for 1 hour at a supervised visitation center. Every single visit, the boys cry. He doesn't recognize his father. He calls him the man on the laptop. And on every court-supervised video call, Ethan weeps. He's in counseling, not just because the judge mandated it, but because he claims he's desperate to fix himself. He sent me a 50-page business proposal detailing a plan for reconciliation, full of metrics and milestones for winning back my trust. I deleted it without a response. In his minimalist, rented condo, he keeps one picture. A candid shot of me from our honeymoon laughing, before the betrayal, before he decided to optimize me out of his life. He says it's the last thing he sees every night. A data point for the colossal error he made. He'll never lead another company. His name is a curse in the venture capital world. Every search result is a tombstone. The news articles, the leaked internal emails. He's isolated, a pariah, living with the fallout of his choices. Chloe is serving year 2 of a 7-year sentence in a federal facility in California for corporate espionage. She works in the data entry department, earning 40 cents an hour. She has no one. Ethan tried to contact her legal team once. They sent back a cease and desist. Her own family disowned her after the verdict. My former protege, another young woman Ethan had been grooming, is in a different prison. She turned state's witness. I once received a typed letter from her. I made a terrible mistake. I hope you can find peace. I shredded it after reading her name at the bottom. Chloe will be 41 when she's released. The protege is serving 18 months. She lost everything. Her parents took custody of her daughter. She works in the prison library. I hear she's attempted to appeal her conviction 3 times and failed. She sends formulaic apologies through her lawyer quarterly. My assistant files them away, unread. Chloe will be a middle-aged woman when she gets out, with a felony record, no career, and a reputation that will follow her forever. Ethan is the only one not in a cage, but he's far from free. He lives in a small apartment across the bay and works as a freelance consultant for startups that don't mind the bad press. He has his supervised visit with our son once a month in a sterile government building. He always brings a single, perfect gardenia, my favorite flower. He tries to talk to him. He looks at him with a desperate hunger. My son mostly ignores him. He calls him Ethan. I allow the visits because the court ordered it, and because I want my son to know that his father's failures are not his own. Ethan was the one who, in the end, handed over the evidence against Chloe, who testified about the conspiracy, who tried to salvage something from the wreckage he created. He cries at the beginning and end of every visit. "I'm so sorry," he says to me each time. "I am so fundamentally sorry for the damage I caused. I haven't forgiven him. I never will. You let a virus into our home, and you let it fester," I told him in mediation. "You knew what she was, and you chose it. But you also burned it all down to stop her in the end. So you get this. You can see your son, but you will always, always be a stranger." He just nodded, his face streaked with tears, and accepted his terms. He knows it's a better deal than he deserves. The afternoon light is fading, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The supervisor brings Noah back to me. "Thank you for this, Olivia. I'll see you next month." He leaves without looking back. My friend Sarah buckles Noah into his car seat. "Same time next month?" she asks gently. "That's the plan," I say. "Love you, O. You saved my life, you know." "We're even," I laugh. "We're family." "Fine. Love you, family." They share a quick embrace, and then Sarah is gone. I'm alone with my boy. Noah is getting tired, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "All right, my sweet boy, let's get you home." Bath, then a book. Noah asks, "Book, Mama?" "Yes, my love, always a book." He whispers, "Mama, stay." My eyes sting with tears, but for once, they are tears of gratitude. "Yes, my love. Mama always stays. Mama will never, ever let you go." I lift him into my arms. He's getting so big, a solid weight against my chest. I carry him toward the warm glow of our house. People sometimes ask if I regret not signing the prenup, if I regret trusting him, if I wish I had run at the first red flag. The honest answer is no. Every single choice, every mistake, and every victory brought me here, to this moment, with him. They tried to erase me, and for a little while they did. I broke into 1,000 pieces in that cold, silent hallway 2 years ago. But this is the one thing they never understood about destroying someone. You don't control the design they use to rebuild. I rebuilt myself with a stronger foundation, a clearer purpose, and a spine made of titanium. I am not the woman I was. I don't give my trust freely. My home is secured by a system designed for protecting priceless art. I speak with my therapist every Tuesday. I have medication for the nights the anxiety still creeps in. Sometimes, the chime of an elevator still makes my heart pound. I am scarred, absolutely, but I am not broken. There is a world of difference. To anyone out there listening who feels like they are in the dark right now, I want you to know that I see you. 2 years ago, I was you. I was locked out in the cold, stripped of everything I thought was mine. My home, my financial security, my future. He thought I was powerless, that without him, I had nothing. But he was mistaken. I still had myself. I had a will of iron and a love for my unborn child that was more powerful than any corporation. That was everything. It was the entire world. Now, in the warm, sudsy water, the sound of his laughter fills the small bathroom. I carefully wash his hair, making a little mohawk out of the shampoo. He babbles to his rubber ducks in a language all his own. After his bath, we pick out pajamas. Tonight, it's the ones with the little rocket ships. He points to them himself now, a tiny, determined general. For our story, I choose Where the Wild Things Are. It's 1,000,000 miles away from the dense coding manuals Ethan used to study in bed. This beautiful, simple book is our ritual, a new foundation for me and my son, built over the ruins of old, painful memories. In the story, Max sails home, and right on cue, Noah is already drifting off, his breathing deep and even, his little body relaxed against mine. I kiss his soft cheek, turn on the star projector nightlight, and pull his door almost shut. I walk down the hallway to my study, sit at my desk, and pull up the dashboard for the Haven project on my monitor. The screen is a mosaic of faces. Women we've helped, children playing in safe new yards, families finding their footing. 3,112 families relocated and supported. The number glows in the corner of the screen. All that pain was recycled. It became leverage. Not the empty power I once knew, the kind tied to stock prices and media mentions. This is real power, the power to offer a woman a key to a safe apartment, to fund her legal battle, to help her escape the darkness. I minimize the window and look at the only photo on my desk. It's me in the hospital, holding Noah minutes after he was born, looking completely exhausted but fiercely alive. I won. Not because he and his accomplice faced justice, not because I reclaimed my assets. I won because I am safe, because my son is thriving, and because I finally defined my own value. From the baby monitor, I hear the soft, steady rhythm of Noah's breathing. That awful night, standing alone in that hallway, felt like the end of the world, but it was the start of my real life. It was the moment I stopped hiding my own capabilities, stopped making myself smaller to soothe a fragile ego. They treated me like obsolete technology, ready for the scrap heap, and from that wreckage, I built an empire. I turn off the desk lamp, walk to my bedroom, and lie down. Sleep comes easier these days. The nightmares are ghosts now, their power faded. Tomorrow, I will wake up, kiss my son, make him pancakes, and go to work to expand my sanctuary and help more women. I will live my life on my own terms. The life I designed, the life I built, the life that is untouchable. My name is Olivia Crestwood. I am a founder. I am a protector. I am a survivor. But above all else, I am a mother. And I am finally free. The next morning, bright sunlight pours into our cozy kitchen. I'm flipping blueberry pancakes while Noah bangs a spoon on his high chair tray, creating a cheerful rhythm. He stops, looks right at me with his big, serious eyes, and says, "Mama, happy?" I pause, the spatula hovering in midair, and just drink in his perfect face. "Yes, my love," I say, my voice thick with emotion. "Mama is very, very happy." Then he reaches a tiny, syrup-sticky hand toward my face and says, "Love you, Mama." A warmth spreads through my chest, and I have to blink back tears, not of sorrow, but of sheer, overwhelming relief. "You two are my whole world," I whisper, my voice thick with emotion. "My entire universe." I lean in and kiss both their sticky foreheads. Leo giggles, smearing a bit of pancake syrup in my hair, and I find I couldn't care less. Clara pads into the kitchen, placing a steaming mug of coffee in my hands. We lean against the counter, a comfortable silence between us, just watching the twins attack their breakfast with joyous, chaotic energy. "You really brought him down," she says, her voice low and full of awe. "The untouchable Julian Thorne." A small smile touches my lips. "We did. I'd still be trapped in that glass tower if it wasn't for you." Clara nudges my shoulder. "So, what's next on the agenda for Amelia Vance? You exposed Seattle's biggest tech fraud, built a new life from the ashes, and started a whole non-profit. Are you planning on climbing Mount Rainier next?" My gaze falls back to Leo and Noah, to the sun streaming into this small, cozy kitchen I fought so hard for. A life that's finally mine. Grounded, real, and completely free. "No more mountains to climb," I say, my voice steady. "There's nothing left to prove. It's just this. Just them. Just right now." And for the first time, that feels like more than enough. It feels like everything. Just then, Noah whispers something in Leo's ear, and they both erupt into that pure, uninhibited shriek of laughter that only 4-year-olds can manage. I find myself laughing along, a deep, genuine sound that I thought had been stolen from me forever. This little kitchen in Seattle is my empire now. These 2 little boys are my legacy. This feeling is my victory, and no man like him will ever get close enough to touch it ever again.